The empathy part is very natural to me. I feel emotions of others physically, and I think I am always so drawn to that and drawn to opportunities that allow me to lean into that part of who I am. But I do love the logic piece. I love thinking critically about certain situations. I love questioning them, trying out new solutions that maybe hadn't been tried. And I actually think that by bringing empathy into those types of struggles, those types of challenges, those types of opportunities, it allows there to be solutions that maybe reach a broader audience that maybe hadn't been tapped into before.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun at all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today, Jeff is interviewing Mary Messner. Mary is a professional speaker and an advocate for women and girls. She has dedicated her career to approaching challenges with creativity, refusing to accept the status quo, and leading with a determination to grow others. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Health Education Management from the University of Kansas. Prior to starting her own consulting company, she was the Director of Health Information Management at Research Medical Center in Kansas City and worked for 14 years at Cerner Corporation. She is also Acting Executive Director of Madam President Camp, helping middle school girls learn how to gain confidence and leadership skills. You can learn more about Mary at marymessner.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Mary.
Mary, good morning, and welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah. So you're another Andre Davis introduction. Andre, as we know, is phenomenal. And I'm so glad he introduced us. So yeah, I think we had coffee once, and now we're doing a podcast interview. So can't wait to get into your career and what you're doing now. So, but let's start with something fun. So people that know you at least a little bit, or a friend, what one or two things would surprise them about you?
I think one of the things, okay, I'll start with this one. I drive a minivan, and that still amazes me that I drive a minivan, because I do not ever.
Well, you have 3 kids though, right? 3 children?
I have 2.
Okay.
2 kids. They're
Okay.
6 and 8.
Okay.
And I was anti minivan, and then they arrived, and the practicality of it. Oh my goodness. Sliding van doors. I mean, if you know, you know. If you don't have one, you're probably missing out with littles, but that is something. And I've had people say it. They'll leave a meeting and we'll walk outside, and I'll walk up to my minivan and they'll say, I did not picture you as a minivan driver.
I love it. I love it.
So here I am. I'll say that's one of the first ones. And the second one, and I'll start out with a lot of transparency, and that's that I have, I'll say, moments of self-doubt, like so many of us do. And I am currently navigating this path of how you create transparency around those moments of self-doubt to give other people permission to do that while still maintaining a position of influence and professionalism and power and authority, and balancing those, and just, again, being very transparent, but balancing those is something I've really been trying to lean into recently. So maybe that's something that would surprise people that know me well, or maybe that are just getting to know me.
No, thank you for both of those. I mean, we're all humans at the end of the day, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it's, everybody has their struggles, and I think the pandemic brought that to light and accelerated that, and the focus on it. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So, you're Kansas City native, correct?
I
Yeah.
am born on the Kansas side, made the long trek to the Missouri side now.
Oh, okay. All right. So growing up, what was fun for you? What did you love doing?
I was, I'll say, a crafty kid. On family vacations, my favorite thing to do, this probably puts me into the nerd category, but my favorite thing to do was to find whatever the local bead shop is and go buy beads so I could craft necklaces and give them to friends and family. And I still have a lot of those because, of course, you buy a lot more than you can ever use, and so
Sure.
my kids now have fun with them.
Nice.
But definitely crafty. I
Yeah.
always I always liked that.
Yeah.
I played no sports. I take that back. I played basketball in middle school. And so your listeners know I'm somewhere between 5'10", 5'11". I'm tall. And I have been this height since, gosh, I was about 11 years old. So fifth,
Wow.
sixth grade. So tallest kid in the class.
Wow.
And it took, when you grow that rapidly, that young, there is a whole level of awkwardness that follows you along. And so
Right.
I did basketball in middle school. We had an intramural team. My dad was our coach. We won one game in 3 or 4 years. We did it for
Oh,
just,
jeez.
it was fun.
Right.
But athletics for me was never really anything that I spent a lot of time focusing on. It was much more academic for me through high school and into college. But yeah, I don't have the typical sports story that a lot of young kids
Right. Right.
have.
That it's funny too, because with the pandemic, Zoom has become part of our lives,
Hmm.
professionally. And so if your first meeting with somebody is via Zoom and then you meet them face to face, that's always one of the biggest surprises, how tall or short the person is. So you and I were
Yes.
lucky enough to meet in person, and you were sitting down, and then, when we stood up to go, I'm like, oh yeah, Mary's really tall.
And I wear heels all the
Yeah,
time.
there you
So
go.
I'm comfortable over that 6 foot mark as I walk
Yeah,
around in
your
the world.
wisdom and your knowledge and your expertise is powerful, but then your physical presence is also. So there you go.
Yes.
Yeah. So growing up, did you have any aspiration as an adult? I want to be.
Yeah. I wanted to be a nurse. It was something that probably since I was very little, I was interested in. There's two parts of it that I think I really liked. It was the people side, the ability to engage and to nurture and to help. And then medicine in general is just fascinating. All the different aspects that it provides, always an opportunity to learn and grow. And I spent a lot of time shadowing healthcare professionals in middle school and high school. I had healthcare is it's a predominant career across my extended family. And back in the days before HIPAA, when you could actually shadow family members, I would go and spend evenings with my cousin and my aunt who were neonatal nurse practitioners and see all the little tiny babies, and I'd go with them to see a baby being born, and it was so fascinating. And that was what I was going to do. I was going to be a nurse, and then I was going to become a nurse practitioner and still have some career growth down that path, but all in the healthcare space. Obviously not that today. I never actually became a nurse. I'm happy to share that story as we get into college timing. But yeah, that was a pretty all-consuming goal for me for most of my adolescence.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go to the great University of Kansas, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And did you start with that you were thinking of being a nurse, because you graduated with a health information
Uh-huh.
management degree? So tell us about your degree choice and that journey.
Yeah, I was going to be a nurse. I mean, I started out taking all the prerequisites for nursing school. And I love that you call it the great University of Kansas, because it is great. It's wonderful. Loved my experience there, maybe a little too much.
So, we'll get into some stories about the wheel and the
Oh,
hawk and
all of it,
yeah,
all of
okay.
it. So I was at KU. I think I want to say my first year at KU, what is now Brothers, late 90s, early 2000s timeframe. And yes, the wheel, the hawk, Brothers, Fatsos,
The bull.
jerseys. I mean, the
Yeah,
bull,
yeah,
all of it.
yeah.
I probably had a little bit too much fun. And it's a story that I used to not own. And I would tell people that I intentionally changed my career. But the truth is, I did not prioritize academics as much as I should have.
Hmm.
And for me, I'd always walked this line of knowing that I had a natural smarts about me, if that's even using that word in the right way as I say that sentence. But there was a test taking, and a lot of things like that came easy to me. And so when I went into college, I assumed it would be the same. And I learned quickly, although probably not quickly enough, that that was not the same. There's a different level of rigor that you have to be willing to put yourself through to achieve the grades, those academic outcomes that you're seeking, particularly when you're applying to a competitive program like I was in a nursing program through University of Kansas. I applied and I didn't get in. So this was between my sophomore year and my junior year of college, and I should have started nursing school my junior year of college. Didn't get in, and I had to completely rethink what the future could look like for me. And I spent, I mean, this was painful. That was hard when you grow up with a vision and a goal for so long, and then through your own fault. I mean, this was 100% on
Right.
me. I had to change that goal. I spent a semester at Johnson County Community College. I took business classes, just trying out some different career paths that could potentially be a next step for me. And in the midst of all of that, my mom said, you should talk to your grandmother. She was a medical records librarian. So my grandmother graduated from college in 1944.
Wow.
She went to she's Saint Scholastica up in Duluth, Minnesota. And her degree was as a medical records librarian. And, I heard those words and I thought, no, that there's nothing intriguing about medical records librarian. But again, I didn't really have a lot of options. And so I did some research, and what was medical records librarian degree is now called health information management.
Mm.
And in essence, it is a blend of both business and medicine. And all of my pre-nursing classes that I had taken, anatomy and physiology, and so many of those directly translated into what I was going to be doing. But then there's this business component. So lots of management in the healthcare realm, whether it's hospital administration or working in a medical records department. A lot of those individuals have a background in health information management. All things that I did not know if I wasn't willing to just simply explore and ask questions and try out a couple different things. So that was the shift for me. I ended up going still at KU. I was down at KU Med. It's in the School of Allied Health. Spent the last couple of years there getting a degree in health information management. I graduated with honors, so I fixed that issue that I had.
Nice.
And graduated as the class president, which was just a lot of fun to navigate that. And walked away still feeling like I was connected to that passion of healthcare, but also having the opportunity to use my brain in a new way by bringing in that business aspect. And I'll, in retrospect, I am, there's those moments where you think you've totally screwed things up and you've made decisions that are going to point your life in a path that is not where it was supposed to go. Well, I thought that was what had happened. And in retrospect, it was the right thing to happen. There's no accidents in these type of experiences. I know I would not have been satisfied had I gone down the career trajectory that I expected to go down. I do believe I ended up exactly where I was supposed to be by navigating that intersection with healthcare and business.
Yeah. Did you have a aptitude for, because the nursing profession is more, empathy, caring, and, kind of the information system side, which I spent, the vast majority of my career in, is more, the logical thinking, reasoning, but did you have that aptitude for the latter?
Yes, I would say I had both.
Yeah.
The empathy part is very natural to me. I feel emotions of others physically, and I think I am always so drawn to that and drawn to opportunities that allow me to lean into that part of who I am. But I do love the logic piece. I love thinking critically about certain situations. I love questioning them, trying out new solutions that maybe hadn't been tried. And I actually think that by bringing empathy into those types of struggles, those types of challenges, those types of opportunities, it allows there to be solutions that maybe reach a broader audience that maybe hadn't been tapped into before. So to answer your question, yes, I think I have both of those. What I learned was the opportunity to integrate them in a way that is really positive.
So it looks like you graduated, walked down the hill, in that nice Sunday in May, and then you like got a job. It looks like immediately. How did you get your first job?
Yeah, I did walk down. I walked down the beautiful hill 5 years after I started. So I ended up on the 5 year plan thanks to that little snafu in the middle.
It's all good.
I think like so many, you get out of college and there's that belief that the job is going to show up. And I was fortunate that in the time that I graduated, I was in 2004, we hadn't quite hit that crisis that so many people ended up struggling with, not long afterwards, of that job market not being what it was. I prioritized a lot of interviews. This was the advice from my parents. Just if there is an opportunity, apply for the job, do the interview. Whether you get the job or not, it's an opportunity to practice. So wise words from my parents and from many others who've probably heard the same thing. And maybe you roll your eyes when you're a kid and then you realize in retrospect, it's the right thing to do. And I did that. I had some different job interviews, nothing that I thought was necessarily the right fit, but still always a good experience. I had a really interesting situation happen. I got a call from someone and they said, "Hi, we're a recruiter. There is an open position at Research Medical Center in Kansas City for the Assistant Director of Health Information Management. We think you'd be a good candidate. Can we put your name forward?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So that phone call happened and then it went silent. I never heard anything. I went ahead and called this was me now. So it appears as though in 2004, I immediately started a job, but you're 3 to 4 months into a job search, which is unsettling. So I called this HR department and I said, "Hey, I had a call from one of your recruiters about this assistant director position. Is it still open?" And they said, "We don't use recruiters." And I said, "Well, someone called me and told me about the position." And I believe what had happened is it was one of those third party recruiting firms that was hoping to put a resume
Right.
forward and maybe get a
Yeah.
kickback. And Research, who had recently been purchased by HCA, they were not going down that path.
Mhm.
But they said, "But since we have you and since you called, could you send over your resume?" And I said, "Sure." So I sent it while we're on the phone. And they said, "If you can hold on for a minute, we'd like to get the Director of Health Information Management on the phone." And I said, okay, sounds good. So I had this unplanned interview right there on the spot. And part of why I think that opportunity presented itself is one, I was open to it. Working in the hospital setting was actually not where I ultimately wanted to be. The health information management in the healthcare setting at that time was generally a basement room full of paper medical records. Back to that, my grandmother as a medical records librarian, not something that seemed remotely glamorous, but it's a job, and so
Right.
you got to
Sure.
start somewhere.
Sure.
So I think I was open to it, which is why that opportunity presented itself. And a lot of other people had that same kind of preconceived idea that this is not glamorous and we're going to go work for the Cerner corporations of Kansas City, which is fun and more exciting, and not work in this basement medical records department. They were having a hard time filling the position. It had actually been posted for a while. So at a very quick phone interview, I went in and met with the director of the department. I had had an internship at the end of college, and I'd put together a workbook with everything I'd done in the internship. And I said, I know I have no experience outside of this internship, but let me show you what I did. Here is this workbook that describes the work that I've done. Yes, I'm 22, 23. Yes, this is new and I'm a bit untested as an assistant director, but I can do this. I know I can. And they said, all right. I would say I have always had a bit of an air of you don't know that you can't do something until you try. So it's always worth trying. And I think a lot of women struggle with that. There's the
Right.
statistic of women won't apply for a job unless they're
Right.
100% qualified. I think that the only way that you can actually know if you're qualified for something is to go do it and learn from it. And then you can decide, is this the right spot for me or is this not?
Right.
So I gave it a shot, and I immediately at I think I was 23, ended up managing a team of 50 people at the time,
Jeez.
navigating that brand new experience, made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot from it. But it
Wow.
was a start from a fast start out of
Yeah, no
college, I will
kidding.
say.
That's a great story. Yeah, I mean, and as you and I know, titles don't mean anything,
Mm-mm.
really. But I mean, to have like, when I came out of college, I was in the management training program for software development. So, it was a pass fail. It was a 4-month training for AT&T, and my title was MPS 22, member programming staff 22. Like, but you were an assistant
Glamorous, Jeff.
director, like right out of college. So that's, I mean, your friends were getting, financial analyst one positions, and like you had a big title.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
The interesting part about it is about 3 or 4 months after that, the director left. And so it was me leading this department while they tried to figure out who my boss was going to be. And I participated in the interviewing process. I started interviewing, my potential boss. They ended up hiring a guy who at the last minute backed out. And when I got wind that he backed out, I marched up to the CFO's office, and the CFO is the one who is responsible for the health information management department. And I said, I want the job. And she said back to me, you don't have experience. I'm concerned that you would not be able to succeed in this role. And I said, then let me try, because I know I can. And she said, she said back to me, and I say this with so much respect for her because I learned so much. She pushed me really hard and I learned so much from her. And she said, be honest with me. Is it the money you're after? And I said, no, it's actually the title. So it's interesting you point out that titles don't matter, but I knew if I could have a director level title on my resume a year out of college,
oh
new
yeah.
doors would open up.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, let's give it a shot. And oh, she micromanaged the heck out of me. And I mean, and I don't blame her for it. Again, I didn't know what I was doing, but she would show up in the department. She questioned so much of what I did but at the time that was hard. In retrospect, she wasn't questioning it to belittle me. She was questioning me because she knew that I could learn and I could grow. And she was challenging me with the intention of growing me, not challenging me with the intention of belittling me. And it was a lot of 12 to 14-hour days. The health information management department at the time was a 24-hour department. So I had 3 shifts. I periodically would check in on the night shift. You had people working there on Christmas Eve. You had people working there over Thanksgiving. I wanted to still be a presence for them. I wanted them to know that even when they were there by themselves, for example, they still had someone who had their back and was looking out for them. And again, a learning experience that probably taught me what it means to be a servant leader and how you continue to grow your team and support your team in ways that maybe are outside of the realm of titles or money or the typical good job attaboys that so often leaders end up giving.
Mary, outside your CFO, you obviously learned from her, and through her micromanagement and other things. But
Mm-hmm.
was there any books or any other people you leaned on? Because to be like 23, 24 with that kind of title and that type, I mean, to run, a 24/7 3-shift operation. Most people don't get that chance till maybe late 20s, early 30s. So what was your kind of learning process to become a great leader?
Um, I'll tell you honestly, I relied on my family a lot. My family, particularly on my mom's side, it's huge. There were 5 kids. So my grandmother, the one that graduated with a college degree in
Yeah,
1944, there were
pioneer.
yes, there were 5 kids, 4 girls, 1 boy, all who went on to have multiple children. So this vast network of cousins and aunts and uncles that I had, I would say, I'd have to do the math here quickly, but 90% of my cousins are women. And every single one of them followed in my grandmother's footsteps. It is a very high powered team of women. And I want to be clear when I say high powered, I don't necessarily just mean titles, but I mean in terms of them being very self assured and confident and willing to take risks and to try new things. And I had these role models of women who were setting their sights on something and achieving it. I mean, the whole time that I was growing up. And I continued to lean on them and to watch them and observe them and ask the questions. My mom was a teacher and then went on to become an educational consultant, start her own business, and created these incredible educational opportunities all throughout Kansas City. And so she became a huge role model for me of someone that I could go to for questions and struggles. My dad, also a business owner, owned a construction company, started his business knocking on doors after college saying, hey, is there any, small jobs that I can do around the house? And that grew into a very successful construction company. So I'd love to say, yeah, I read this book and it gave me all the answers that I needed. But I think for me, it was who I surrounded myself with and the willingness to observe others' success and learn from it. As my career progressed, I'll also add in that the willingness to be vulnerable and say, I don't know how to navigate this situation and get comfortable saying, I don't know, continue to open up new conversations and learnings and new resources that could be there as I was growing and developing.
How did the people that worked under you that were older, which is I'm sure
Mhm.
had to be the vast majority, or how did they take it that as a person 23, 24 was the leader of their
Mhm.
team?
Some were okay with it, some were not. I remember, chalk this up to lessons learned. I remember trying to overcome my age with a little bit of unwarranted arrogance and pretending like I knew all of the answers. That created some stress. One team member in particular who had been there much longer, obviously, and she was a team lead, so people reported to her, and then she reported to me. We had a pretty heated debate about this, and her questioning me, and it was one of those moments that she walked out of my office, and I had that opportunity to either say the way that situation was handled was inappropriate on both ends, but could fall under the category of insubordination, or I could use it as an opportunity for me to sit back and listen and say, the reason that it escalated was because I wasn't listening. It got to a point where it became a difficult conversation because I wasn't willing to listen and to hear what she was trying to tell me and to use it as an opportunity to learn. I think about that so often, that she called me out in a way that was not entirely pleasant. And another one of those things that in the moment feels awful, and in retrospect, you can have so much gratitude for, because I learned from it. Other people on the team, I keep talking about my grandmother. One of the guys that worked in my department, my grandmother actually was his boss when he was right out of college. She was the medical records librarian at St. Mary's, a hospital that's no longer here in Kansas City, but was here previously. She was the medical records librarian, head of the department, when he graduated from college, and he worked for her. And then 60 years later, or I guess 40 years later, he was then working for me, which is wild.
Wow.
And he was one that we could just have fun with that, the absurdity and how kind of bizarre that was,
Right.
but also, kind of have some fun
It's
with
kind of
that.
yeah, it's very cool though that you had
Uh-huh.
that, that bond with your
It's wild.
grandmother from the work perspective like that. Incredible. So you were successful at HCA and Research Medical.
Mhm.
What made you go to Cerner?
Cerner still always had that appeal of being a young company, a place where you could grow, you could travel the world. And I kept in touch with a lot of people I graduated with went to go work for Cerner. And I kept in touch with a lot of them. And when opportunities came up, I would, chat with them and see if there were potential positions over there. And an opportunity came up on the health information management team. So they had a piece of technology that works specifically in health information management departments. And when that opportunity came up, it felt like the right time. I was only at research for about 3 or 4 years. It was not a long stint. And but when that came up, so I was 27, 28 at that time, and an opportunity to go work with a group of people that probably were more, age-wise on the same level as me, growth, development, still wanting to be a strong professional, but also have some fun. I was craving some of that social interaction from a job. And so yeah, that's when I made the leap to go over to Cerner.
Yeah, so I think you were like there for 14 years. What kind of
Mhm.
was like the accomplishment there you were most proud of?
I really feel like the people that I worked with, and I'll when I say accomplishment, I would say both personal accomplishment in terms of what I was able to gain, but also that accomplishment of feeling like I was able to make an impact. The biggest thing I'll tell everyone, that not only did Cerner make such a huge impact in the work they did with their clients, but it created this just brilliant group of individuals, most of whom, truthfully, are no longer at Cerner or Oracle as it is today, but they're now out making impacts, many still in the healthcare space, but also like me, who went on to start their own business and try and have an impact in a different way. My 14 years at Cerner was always in the consulting space. I was always taking on roles that allowed me well, maybe I'll phrase that differently. Maybe they didn't allow me. Maybe I just went ahead and took this for myself. But an opportunity to question the way things had always been done and to try new things out, whether that was how we interact with a client, how we sell something to a client, how we staff a consulting project. I always sought out experiences where I could question, change, propose, grow, enhance, and ultimately try to leave an impact. And so that whatever process or people that touch that experience down the road, they could be better for it. Cerner was where I was when my kids were born. That was probably one of the most pivotal experiences for me. I quit in 2015 when my daughter was about 6 months old, and I realized doing this whole executive, leading a whole bunch of people, working the long hours, being open to travel, that I couldn't balance that and motherhood in the way that felt right to me. I mean, it was like the thought of I walked into my boss's office and quit, knowing that on the other side of that was me becoming a stay-at-home mom. And that was still to this day, and I say this again transparently because I think a lot of people can relate. I am still trying to figure out who I am as a mother and as a professional. And maybe that is something that's normal, that there is always that seeking of trying to figure out how to balance those two things. But when I quit my job with the goal of becoming a stay-at-home mom, it was such an extreme shift from who I was and to kind of who I was becoming. And then my boss at the time said, "Would you consider staying part-time?" And I said, "Sure." Worst thing that could happen is I would just quit again
Right.
and lean into being a full-time stay-at-home
Well, it
mom
was a
again.
testament to you as the value you provided to your clients and Cerner. So that's great.
Yeah. So I ended up part-time. I took off the executive title. I did not have any more team members. I worked about 20 hours a week. But it goes back to that idea of being in these opportunities that allowed me to kind of question how things had always been done. Me taking on a part-time role opened doors for other people. There were other women that came forward and said, "Wow, how did I do that?" Or how was that done? Could you help me figure out how to try and create an opportunity like that for myself? And so there became this little team of us, and a lot of us ended up working together on special projects that were all part-time. And I applaud my leadership at the time, and I applaud Cerner for being open to saying, if we have talent that we want to retain, it doesn't have to fit into a perfect box.
Right.
That we can actually mold what it should look like so that we can meet those individuals where they are at that time and still get the value that they're able to provide us. I mean, it was a win-win across the board.
Right.
So yeah, I was part-time for 4 years, 5 years. You know, these numbers start to blur.
Right. Right.
The more numbers get added every year, the more they start to blur.
Yeah. So you're at Cerner, now Oracle, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
iconic Kansas City company. Seems to be almost a kiss of death, though, when you build a campus, like Sprint did, and all the struggles they had after that, and obviously Cerner got bought out by Oracle. But so what made you think about leaving, and then after 17-ish years being in a corporate culture, great companies, what made you kind of, I'm going to do my own thing?
Probably two big defining things. The first one is I did come back full time, and I worked with a team, one of the most incredible team of people that I had the pleasure of working with throughout my career at Cerner. It was kind of a hand-picked team. We worked for the VA. The VA was one of our big clients, and we created a training program to help the providers who are caring for veterans use data and outcomes to improve veteran experience. And we structured it. I say we, the team as a whole had put together this program almost like a true university. There was a dean, there was an assistant dean, there was faculty, there was subject matter experts, instructional designers. I joined the team as faculty, and I spent a lot of time standing up in front of a classroom training people. And it was a lot of, I'll use the word soft skills. I think power skills is probably the more appropriate term, but a lot of that type of skill development. And the team of individuals that I worked with, it was the most beautiful experience where we created this level of vulnerability where we could practice talking in front of groups. We did a lot of mock scenarios where we pretend to be an audience. We critique each other, the positive, the negative. It really helped me grow a skill set that I had always loved doing. This public speaking component helped me refine that. So I was doing that for a while. As people started leaving the team, they would say, "Can you take on this next level of leadership?" Okay, yes, I will. Okay, now can you take on the next level of leadership? And before long, I was back to leading this entire program. And I knew the path. I knew what happened because I'd done it before when I was on that executive path. I knew that meant the longer hours. I knew it meant some travel. And I had that hard conversation with myself to say, as much as I'm enjoying this professional growth and challenging that part of who I am again, it still felt out of balance with my family, with the mom that I wanted to be. And I say all of that, and I have to add a little disclaimer that this is my personal story.
Sure.
I think so many women do not experience that. They get just as much out of the professional side as they do the motherhood or the personal side. For me, I couldn't ever figure out how to get those two in balance if my career was going to continue to grow at Cerner. And I remember this is post-COVID. So I was there through COVID. And then in 2021, I had one of the first opportunities to get our whole team and our counterparts at the VA together in person. I mean, you remember, you go back in 2020 and you started craving that in-person interactions.
Yeah.
Oh, it was this, so here it was. We were all going out to DC and we're going to be in this room and at this big, 3-day think session. And I knew I should be excited about it. And I get there and I sit in the room, and 30 minutes in, I say, "I'm miserable. All I want to do is go home." And it was that very clear moment for me that this was no longer the right place. And I spent some time to kind of listen to what my heart was saying and get out of my head a little bit. And it became really clear, and talked to my husband and said, "Okay, I got all the signs I need. It's time for me to walk away." And I put it in my notice, and I think I gave like 2 months. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't in a hurry. I was quite comfortable, hanging out while we tried to figure out the right succession plan and who could step in and who should take over. And all of that was done while it was still Cerner. It was no longer, or it wasn't Oracle at the time. It was still Cerner. So I can claim I never worked for Oracle, even though if you look at LinkedIn, I think they've updated the icon.
Right.
Which is heartbreaking.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of my Sprint friends that I worked with that still were there, didn't like the T-Mobile.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So now you're like, I'm going to do something on my own.
Uh-huh.
Did you have an inkling what that was going to be? Like obviously you are doing, you started your own company or companies. So to talk about that process.
The inkling was that I knew I was a really good professional speaker. And that you're seeing a theme here that like I have a little nugget of something that gives me confidence to say, let's just take the leap. And then I just leap.
Yeah.
So I knew I was good at that. And I thought I could make a career out of this. I didn't know what that looked like. This all goes under that, that reality of, I think when you start a new business, you don't know what you don't know. And that can either paralyze you and cause you to stop and move forward, or it can give you this freedom to say, because I don't know what I don't know, I'm going to screw this up a few times and I'm going to learn from them and I'm going to keep moving forward. So I spent the first year, so fall of 2021 is when I launched my business. My LLC name is actually Highline Creative Group, which I loved the name and I still love it. The creative, the nod to creativity, Highline, the idea that we're all traversing this high line, professional or personal, moving from point A to point B. And sometimes it feels like a really narrow tightrope. Sometimes it feels more secure. And then the more I said it, the more people said, so you're an ad agency? And I said, no, I'm not an ad agency. I did not realize this, again, not knowing what you don't know, that when you throw the word creative into a business title, people assume you're in advertising, marketing, design, something like that.
Right.
So my LLC is still Highline Creative Group. I have a DBA doing business as Mary Messner. So a year later, I rebranded, if you will, to just be representing myself. And that first year, I simply said yes to a lot of things. Can you help my company come up with a change management program? Yes, I can. Can you come deliver a training on becoming a trusted advisor? Yes, I can do that. And I used all of those yeses to help me determine what I liked, what I could succeed at, and probably more importantly, what gave me the energy that I needed to continue to keep putting effort into growing something. And so 2021 was a year of exploration, or 2022, really. That full year was the year of exploration and trying out new things, all with that basic foundation of professional speaking. And then as I moved into 2023, there was a new level of clarity that I wanted to focus more on the keynote speaking, that I really was passionate about engaging with women and helping them understand maybe some of the personal experiences that I've had to date of challenging yourself in new ways and leaning into that vulnerability and authenticity that is really very powerful as a woman that oftentimes we question. So 2023, that's how I've really focused on growing my business. The one other thing that I'll throw out there, because this is important, is my work with the nonprofit Madam President Camp. So my role with this nonprofit Madam President Camp, it's an organization that I'd gotten to know. I did a little bit of work on the side with them when I was still at Cerner, and kind of fell in love with the organization. The whole focus is working with middle school age girls, which is an age where confidence begins to drop and girls begin to question their identity, who they are. External voices start becoming more important than internal voices. And Madam President Camp the whole focus is to engage in that age group, to increase that sense of confidence, or maybe prevent the confidence from decreasing through leadership development, leadership skill development, and civic engagement. So you're a leader. Let's talk to you about how you can engage in your community to go create the impact that you want to see. When I left Cerner and started my business, I called them up and said, I have a little bit of time on my hands. Can I come work for you? And at the time, they were looking for an executive director. They did not have, it's a very small nonprofit, so there was not the funding to pay for a full-time executive director. So I said, let me work with you part-time, and I'll focus on growing the organization, trying to bring in more money, more campers, more impact. And I think the initial conversations, although we never actually put this in writing, the initial conversations were that I would do that for about 6 months. And it's been almost 2 years and I'm still in that role. And so we'll see how that continues to evolve, but it aligns, for me personally, it aligns really nicely with that passion that I have of growing women, not just as leaders in the professional space, but leaders in their own life as well.
Yeah, I love that focus, and we'll talk about that more in a second. But when people go out on their own, the challenge, I've done it, the challenge that people face is getting the business, getting clients, right? So what was your process, that you did to do that? I'd just love to hear that.
For me, my entire client base has been created through my network.
Mhm.
I have not gone down the path of, I'll use the sales term of cold calling. Yeah, I mean, I rely heavily on my network. There's an individual I know, Mike Allison. Mike and I worked together at Cerner for a number of years, and I credit him with so much of my opportunities and engagement in that first year by him simply being willing to introduce me to people. And that also probably gave me a lot of the confidence to go out and start making those introductions on my own, which could be, I used the term cold calling about kind of selling my services, but what I'm talking about here is that willingness to find somebody on LinkedIn and really be impressed with what they're doing and send them a note and say, hey, can I just get to know you better? I really like the content that you create. I really like how you set up your bio. You're really excelling in this space. And could I just buy you a cup of coffee and have some time to maybe learn from you? I did so much of that. My husband joked that I was going to spend all of my profits in the first year on coffee because I spent so much time going to coffee with people. But it's what is so beautiful about this community here is everyone said yes. Yes, sure. Let's meet. Let's talk. And that opened doors that I did not know probably even existed. Some of that simply being, hey, I'd love to introduce you to this individual. They have a women's group and they bring in speakers. Would you like to meet with them? And maybe there's an opportunity there. So everything for me was dependent upon my network and people being willing to make the introduction for me. And that's something that I think is so fundamentally important for all of us to do for each other. I mean, think about you and I are talking because Andre Davis introduced us
Yes.
via email.
And he introduced
That's
me. Yeah, he introduced me to Mike Allison, and
Mike
I
Allison.
don't know if I
Yeah.
should admit this in a podcast, but I think I have a budding bromance with Mike.
Uh-huh.
I so enjoy talking to him.
Yes.
It's bad, but I just interviewed
He's
him for the
wonderful.
podcast. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, he's really wonderful. But I think that's how it's done. And you hear me talk about authenticity. That is how you create authentic connections is you you genuinely spend time getting to know people, not going into it saying, what can I do for you and what can you do for me, but simply saying, there's something about you that I really admire. Can we just meet and talk? And that is something I have tried to do. I'm still learning how to succeed in that space, but that is something that has truly been the biggest game changer and the biggest catalyst for any type of development that I have.
Yeah, I mean, I love your focus in terms of, especially with the Madam President camp, because, and your focus on kind of women and leadership and your own journey that balances, motherhood and professional corporate. I've interviewed female CEOs, and if a male CEO cries or go, he's sensitive, that's so good. But if a female cries, CEO, it's like, she's weak. So it's a hard balance, right? And so I love how you talk about that. Obviously, you're focused on women in leadership, and the middle school age young ladies that you're trying to give them self-esteem and help them. But what are your thoughts of being a young 25-year-old male in the workforce? Because I kind of look at it, and what ever happened in the past happened, right? What in terms of we talked earlier about women not applying for jobs if they didn't make 100% of the qualifications, where
Mm-hmm.
a male would do that. But I'm just curious what you think about, kind of their career journey in this new environment.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you bring that up. So I spoke at it was at a Central Exchange event. I was one of their speakers, and my topic was on culture of women. And the whole theme of the conference was culture. And I talked about how women can support each other to create a culture of opportunity and encouragement, but also one of individuality, and how all of us truly are individuals that show up in a unique way every single day, and that by encouraging that, we can strengthen each other. And I had a man come up to me afterwards. So there's a small percentage of the conference is men. And a man came up afterwards and he said, if you took out the word woman from what you said and replaced it with the word man, every single bit of it would still ring true. And it was this thought-provoking moment for me that while I'm spending time encouraging women because they need that level of encouragement, the 25-year-old man that's entering the workforce also needs that permission to show up as an individual, to bring his personal self in to work, to explore what it means for him to be a professional, an individual, a dad. And that while we are spending so much time focusing on women because that is what is needed right now, it is also a message that is important for men to hear. And it's a human message. It's not just a women's message. It is a human message that if each of us really can start to recognize the power that comes with our own individuality, I mean, how beautiful could be that instead of someone saying, well, as a man, I can't cry in this room, but if I do cry, here's how it's going to be interpreted, to walk in and say, I actually don't care about the impression it's going to leave. This is what's authentic to me in this moment. So here's how I'm going to respond. And we're at a point right now where people are craving that. They're craving the ability to show up as themselves.
Right.
And we should offer each other permission to do that.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Yeah, I'm glad that came up because I just think it's interesting if you're a young male in corporate America today in terms of your career journey. So I was just curious on your thoughts on that. But yeah, 100% agree. What kind of the clients most appeal to you that you can help the most?
When people ask about my ideal client, the only answer that I have to give is really a client base that is willing and open to grow and listen and consider new ideas and being open to shifting maybe long-held mindset beliefs. It doesn't fall into a certain industry. While I do speak predominantly to women's groups, just like we talked about a minute ago, there is an appetite for this as just a human conversation, not necessarily a women's focused conversation. I have a very clear picture and visualization of exactly what my ideal client engagement looks like. And for me, the bigger the audience, the better. I feed off of an audience. I get the energy that comes from an audience, and that drives me and excites me. So the bigger the team of people I'm speaking to, the better. I'm one of those weirdos that loves the stage. But I think that it's a mindset. The ideal client is someone who's willing to listen and to think and to consider new perspectives.
So I have to ask this question. I watched your speaker reel, and there was a tattoo parlor incident in your life. So I need to know more about that, and so does my audience.
Yeah, well, okay, that's fair. I throw it out there so somebody's going to ask. Okay, so I talked earlier about not getting into nursing school. And in that moment that I did not get in, I decided I needed to do something that I don't know, had a level of permanence or anchored me in that moment. And, at 20 years old, getting a tattoo seemed like the thing that I should go do. So I did. I have a tattoo. It's a blue star. Don't ask me why I picked blue or a star. I just liked it. And there you go.
There
There's
you
there's
go.
there's the story. It's
There
a
it is.
tiny
It's
little blue
public. It's
star.
out there
So
till Apple and Spotify podcasts and Amazon podcast
yes,
goes away. Uh,
hello world. That is the tattoo that I have. Yes.
I won't ask you where it is. So, but the other, so I love to help two groups of people on the podcast. One is we talked about recent college graduates. What advice would you give them in terms of obtaining a great job?
The two things I'll say is be open to opportunities. We do ourselves a disservice assuming that the right job looks like the what our friends are doing or what our parents did or what the successful guy that lives down the street is doing. And I think being open to opportunities to learn and grow, particularly when you're looking for that first job or that new job, being open to opportunities that may not be where you see yourself long term, but is an opportunity to grow. Don't shy away from those. So that's the first thing that I'll say. Networking to me is huge. I tell everybody, we have a lot of college age mentors that we work with through Madam President Camp. And I tell all of them, get out there on LinkedIn, get your profile out there, start engaging with people, because those opportunities to learn and for doors to open, you don't know where those exist until you put yourself out there in that networking space. And then, similar to my own journey is, did I say two things? Because I'm throwing out three now.
Yeah, that's fine.
the
All good.
the opportunity to not question yourself, to say, I can't say if I will or will not succeed in this space until I'm willing to give it a shot. Lean into that and try those things that maybe feel a little scary and you don't know if you'll be successful on day one, because the reality is you won't.
Right.
Even the most seasoned person will step into a new job and they're going to have to figure it out because maybe the company they're with before did things differently or there's new people dynamics. No one will succeed right out of the gate. All of us will end up having some level of struggling as we're trying something new. So I think for someone who's entering the workforce at a young age, remember that your age isn't necessarily a deterrent if you're willing to go into it and own it and use it as an opportunity to learn and grow.
Yeah, that's great advice. The other group I like to help, and you've had a different experience than I think any of my other 50 plus guests have had, but usually, you start out as an individual contributor, and then you get the promotion to lead a group of people, and then you're responsible, for other people for the first time in your professional career. Obviously, you were thrown into the lion's den per se. So, what advice do you have for those people that just become leaders and they're just starting their leadership journey?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say is you are who you are, regardless of your title. Whether you're an individual contributor or you are a leader, that should not change how you show up each day. Honesty creates a level of trust. Authenticity creates that level of trust. Openness creates that level of trust. And so whether you're an individual contributor who has a peer group that relies on you, you're still a leader to them, whether it's through direct influence or through indirect influence. That same thing happens. Yes, it's a different level of responsibility when someone reports to you directly, but still showing up authentically and remembering that trust is such a huge foundation for everyone. That rule doesn't change. no matter the title or the sphere of leadership or influence.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And then you might be the first person to actually frame that the answer to that question that way. So thank you for that. Well, Mary, you've been great. I love your energy. It's just a pleasure to talk to you. So thank you so much for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks. You too.
It was so great to talk to Mary. I love her advocacy for females of all ages. Here she is, a successful professional speaker, leader, consultant, and she talked a little bit about her, overcoming her own self-doubt. And I can't even imagine, Joe, you might talk about how she pivoted in college, but, right out of school, she had 23 people that she was leading a team of. And I mean, that's phenomenal. That's definitely very unique among our guests to date. And anytime you can talk about tattoos and college bars at the University of Kansas, it's always a fun interview. Joe, what did you take away?
She was definitely unique in several different aspects of all the guests that we've had so far. One of them that's unique is that as a sophomore, she was going to go back and start nursing school, and she didn't get into nursing school. And I think that's the earliest abort that we've ever had.
Because of the bars at the University of Kansas.
Because of the bars at the University of Kansas. That wasn't my college experience, by the way. In the college that I went to, if you could write a check, if that check didn't bounce, you were in. That wasn't a problem at all. But that was interesting that then she very successfully pivoted, ended up spending 5 years to get a 4-year degree, which is not unusual. That happens a lot. And then was wildly successful after that as a manager and as a public speaker and everything. An interesting thing that I thought that she came up with was she was talking about nursing as being both right brain and left brain. And I never really thought of it like that before, but I've always learned that a doctor's responsibility is to treat the ailment. A nurse's responsibility is to treat the patient. And so a doctor can afford to not have a great patient relationship. You wish that he would, but as long as he's doctoring and treating what ails you, that works. But a nurse can't afford to do that. A nurse has to be both left brain and right brain. She has to both know all the psychology and the understanding and the empathy of being with the patient, as well as all of the science and everything goes with drugs and what a CC is and how to give an injection and all that kind of stuff. It was an interesting concept.
Yeah, and I think she gave some stat about like 90% of her female, of her relatives are female, like her cousins.
Yeah.
It's used. And, I have to mention, like her grandmother graduated college in 1944. Like what percent of the college graduates in 1944 were female? I got to think it's like under 10%. I mean, I should have done the research on that, but you can see why she's such a powerful advocate for, women and young females.
She gets it naturally. It was an amazing conversation.
Yeah. What leadership advice would you give the audience today, Joe?
Today, we're going to go to that great philosopher named Meemaw. One time when she was talking to a young philosopher named Sheldon Cooper, Meemaw said, "When a Texan gets knocked off a horse, he gets right back on. That is the second most important thing about being a Texan, right after thinking you're better than anyone else."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.